On the morning of my 67th birthday, I stood on the curb outside my home, clutching a small suitcase and wearing the blue sweater Ethan had given me 2 birthdays ago. The air was crisp, quiet. He didn't even step out of the car, just popped the trunk, eyes fixed on his phone. No happy birthday, no hug, just, they're expecting you. I tried to smile, to not let it show, but my fingers trembled as I lifted the suitcase out myself. The facility, Rose Pines, wasn't awful. It had clean beige walls and those fake plants in the corners, the kind that try too hard to seem alive. A nurse greeted me with a clipboard. "Room 214, she said, not even looking up. Ethan handed her a folder, said, "She's a fall risk," and turned to leave. That was it. He didn't even say goodbye. I stood there frozen, holding a folder with my own medical history as if I were already a ghost. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Before all this, before Rose Pines, before the silence, I lived in a little 2-bedroom house with green shutters and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Well, technically, it was ours. Ethan and I had picked it together after his father passed, just the two of us trying to rebuild what we'd lost. He was 10 at the time, small, serious, and with eyes too old for his age. I remember how tightly he held my hand that first night in the empty house. "It'll be okay, Mom," he said. "I'll take care of you." And for a long time, he did. I worked as a librarian for 30 years, surrounded by books, kids, quiet. My world was soft, predictable. Mornings meant cinnamon oatmeal. Evenings meant crossword puzzles and soft jazz on the radio. Every Sunday, Ethan came over for dinner. Sometimes he brought his laundry. Other times, groceries I didn't ask for. "Just making sure you're eating," he'd say, setting them on the counter like a grown man taking care of a fragile thing. I let him. It made him feel good. Made me feel needed. He was my pride, my greatest success. A college graduate, a tech consultant, his name on the door of some firm I never quite understood. He wore polished shoes and cologne that smelled expensive. When we went out to dinner, he always insisted on paying. "It's your turn to relax, Mom," he'd say, squeezing my hand. I believed him. I really did. Even when he started canceling our weekly dinners. Work's insane. "Emily wants to try this new spot. I'll call you soon." I told myself it was normal. He was busy, important, building a life. I didn't want to be the clingy mother, the one who guilt-tripped or begged. So instead, I adjusted. I stopped setting 2 places at the table. I learned to laugh with the television instead of across from someone. I told the ladies at the library that Ethan was just busy, not distant. There's a difference, right? When he did come over, he'd scroll through his phone while I talked. I noticed how his eyes glazed when I told him about my garden or the book club or how my knees had been aching a bit more lately. Once I mentioned I was thinking of getting a cat for company, and he said without looking up, "What if you fall and no one finds you? A cat won't help." It stung, but I nodded. He was right, I guessed. He was always right. Still, every year on my birthday, I waited for the knock on the door. I baked the chocolate cake he loved. I wore my nicest sweater. I told myself this year would be different. And for a while it was. On my 65th birthday, he took me out to a waterfront restaurant. We laughed over wine. He told me stories about his clients. I watched the city lights shimmer in the bay and thought, this is enough. Maybe he doesn't say it, but he cares. I kept every card he ever gave me, stored them in a box under my bed. Some had messy scribbles from childhood, others crisp signatures from adulthood. But the last one was from 2 years ago. After that, the cards stopped. I didn't tell anyone, but sometimes I reread them on quiet nights, just to feel something again. And yet, even with all the changes, missed dinners, shorter calls, fewer laughs, I never thought he'd actually leave me, not really. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive. I thought maybe this was just what growing older looked like. People drifted, sons got busy, lives moved forward without you. But I still held on to the idea that he loved me. Deep down, that no matter how far apart we grew, I was still his mother. Still the woman who taught him how to tie his shoes, who stayed up through every fever, who cheered at every graduation. I believed, foolishly, maybe, that love counted for something. So when he said, "They're expecting you," and didn't look back, something inside me cracked. Not loud or dramatic, just quiet. Like a page being torn from the middle of a book you weren't done reading. I didn't know it then, but the story of my life was about to turn a page I never saw coming. It was subtle at first, too subtle to call it anything at all. Just a moment, a flicker, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't already looking for cracks. But now, looking back, I realized that's when the foundation started to shift. It was 2 years before the nursing home. Mother's Day, a Sunday. I remember waking up early to bake the banana bread Ethan loved as a child. I'd wrapped a little care package for him, too. His favorite herbal tea, some socks I found on sale, and a framed photo of us from when he was 5, both of us covered in frosting from a cake we'd tried to bake. It was one of those homemade things that mothers do without expecting anything back. But deep down, I was hoping for a visit. I waited all morning, kept the bread warm in the oven. I even wore a little lipstick, just in case. Noon passed, then 2. At 2:38, my phone buzzed. Happy M-Day. 2 words. No heart, no call. Not even a full sentence. I stared at it for a while, thinking maybe he'd call afterward. Maybe he was on his way. Maybe he'd gotten busy, distracted. I texted back something cheerful. Thanks, love. Hope you're having a good day, too. But he never replied. I tried to shake it off. After all, he was a grown man with a demanding job. Maybe his girlfriend had planned something. Maybe he didn't want to hurt my feelings by saying he had other plans. I told myself all the right things a mother tells herself when she wants to believe everything is fine. But that night, as I ate the banana bread alone in a quiet kitchen, I felt something new creep in. Something heavier than disappointment. It was the first time I questioned whether he was pulling away, or if I was simply being left behind. Still, I said nothing. A few weeks later, we were on a video call, one of those short ones he squeezed between meetings. I mentioned a small leak in the kitchen and how the plumber said it might cost more than expected. He sighed, loudly. "Mom, maybe it's time to start thinking about downsizing," he said, his voice clipped. "That place is too much for you." I blinked. "It's just a leak, Ethan." "Yeah, but you've had other issues too. The heater last winter, remember?" "That's normal," I said quietly. "It's a house. Things break." But he wasn't listening. He was already talking about senior condos near his office, safer neighborhoods, and one-bedroom layouts with no stairs. It felt more like a business transaction than a conversation about my life. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't just suggesting. He was planning a life for me that didn't include my house, my garden, my neighborhood walks, or Sunday dinners in the kitchen where I taught him how to cook scrambled eggs. I felt the shift again, that same flicker from Mother's Day, that sense that I wasn't really a person in his eyes anymore. I was a problem to manage, a task to complete. After that call, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I looked around at the life I'd built, the photos on the wall, the curtains I'd sewn myself, the creaky floorboard in front of the fridge that always made me smile. And I asked myself a question I wasn't ready to answer. Was my son starting to see me as a burden? I told myself not to jump to conclusions, not to be dramatic. After all, children grow up and roles reverse. It's natural. But deep down, it didn't feel like love changing shape. It felt like love slipping away. I didn't speak about it to anyone. Not to my friends, not to the ladies in book club. What would I even say? That my son texted Happy M-Day and I took it as a warning sign. That he mentioned condos and I felt discarded. They'd have told me I was lucky to have a son who cared about my safety. And maybe I was. But something in the tone of his voice, the weight of that sigh, the speed with which he brushed off my words, it stayed with me, lingered, like a slow, steady erosion you don't notice until the ground gives out. That was the first red flag. I didn't wave it, I buried it. but it was there. After that call, something between us shifted, not with a bang, but with quiet erosion, like water carving through stone. Not enough to alarm anyone else, just enough that I could feel it in the little silences. Ethan stopped asking about my days. Our calls, once filled with jokes and long, winding tangents, grew short, efficient. He'd call while driving, his voice half distracted, his answers clipped. If I told him about a new book I was reading or the volunteer work I'd started at the library, he'd respond with a flat, "That's nice," then move on to his schedule, his meetings, his life. At first, I tried harder. I baked him his favorite blueberry scones when he said he might stop by. They sat on the counter for 3 days before I threw them out. I texted him pictures of my roses blooming. He used to help me plant them when he was little, but the messages stayed unread. I remember one afternoon in particular. It was late spring. I had made lemonade from scratch and sat out on the porch, hoping maybe he'd surprise me. When his car finally pulled up, my heart skipped, like it always did. But he didn't look up when he got out. No wave, no smile, just a quick step inside, muttering something about checking the pipes. I followed him in, eager to chat, but he barely acknowledged me. "Did you schedule that eye appointment yet?" he asked, pulling open a cabinet. "You said your vision's been off." "I'm still deciding on the doctor," I replied. He sighed long and heavy. "Mom, you've been deciding for 3 weeks. This is why you need help keeping track of things." I stared at him, the glass of lemonade sweating in my hand. "I'm capable, Ethan. I just hadn't gotten around to it yet." He didn't argue. He just shook his head, looked around the kitchen like it was already someone else's problem, and changed the subject. It wasn't the words that hurt the most. It was the absence of warmth, the way he looked through me, like I was slowly becoming invisible. And it wasn't just the calls or the visits. It was the absence of questions. He no longer asked how I was sleeping, if I'd made it to church, if I needed anything from the store. It was as if I were becoming background noise in his life, static he learned to tune out. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was being too emotional, too sensitive. Maybe this was just how grown sons acted, how busy lives took over. But deep down, I knew better. One Sunday, I invited him for dinner. I spent the day making chicken pot pie, his favorite as a kid, and set the table with the good china. I even lit candles. I wanted to recreate the warmth we used to have. Something simple, something familiar. He texted an hour before. "Emily's not feeling well. Rain check?" I replied. "Of course. Hope she feels better." I never got a reply. That night, I sat at the table alone, the pie untouched. I blew out the candles, washed the dishes, folded the napkins back into the drawer. That was the night I stopped calling him first. The next week, I overheard him on speakerphone with a friend. He was in my kitchen talking about his weekend. I was in the hallway folding towels. "She just forgets stuff," he said. "Doesn't realize how bad it's gotten. I think she still thinks she's 30. He laughed. So did his friend. I stood there, the towels pressing into my chest, like they were the only thing holding me upright. It was the first time I realized he'd started narrating my life to other people. Not with love, not with pride, but like I was a burden he was bravely shouldering. From then on, I saw it everywhere. When I spoke too slowly, he'd finish my sentences. When I offered to help carry groceries, he waved me off like I was fragile glass. When I talked about my dreams, traveling, maybe taking a class, he smiled the way someone might smile at a child who said they wanted to fly. I wasn't a mother to him anymore. I was a project, a task, a responsibility. The worst part? He never yelled, never cursed, never hit. His cruelty was quiet, casual, and constant, and somehow that made it hurt even more. It was supposed to be a small celebration, a casual brunch at a cafe Ethan liked downtown. Nothing fancy, just something to mark Emily's promotion. She had just become head of marketing at her firm, and Ethan, ever the supportive boyfriend, had organized a little get-together. He asked if I wanted to come, said it would be nice to have me there. That word, nice, rang hollow, but I accepted. I was hungry for time with him, even if I had to share it. I spent the morning ironing my blouse. The pale green one Ethan had once said brought out my eyes. I brought along a small bouquet of lilies for Emily. She liked lilies. I remembered from a conversation months ago, and I arrived 5 minutes early, not wanting to inconvenience anyone. The restaurant buzzed with people. It had one of those open concept layouts with sunlight flooding through the ceiling-high windows and a constant clatter of dishes and chatter. Ethan was already seated with Emily and two of her colleagues, young, polished, glowing with the self-importance of city professionals. Ethan didn't stand when I arrived, just looked up from his mimosa and nodded. "Hey, Mom." I smiled and offered the flowers. Emily took them with a quick, "Oh, thanks," and passed them to a waiter without a second glance. No one asked me how I'd been. No one even offered a seat. I pulled out a chair for myself and sat. The conversation was fast, filled with names I didn't recognize, acronyms I didn't understand, and laughter I wasn't included in. I tried to follow along, tried to offer something, anything, but every time I opened my mouth, someone cut in or moved on. It was like watching life from the other side of a glass wall. At one point, the waiter came to take our orders. I glanced at the menu, trying to find something light. "Could I have the vegetable quiche and a pot of Earl Grey?" I asked softly. The waiter nodded, but Ethan leaned over and said, not quietly, "You sure, Mom? You had trouble with your card last time." I froze. A beat passed. Then Emily giggled. "Oh no, really," Ethan smiled, shaking his head. "She got flustered at the checkout and kept trying to tap the receipt printer." Everyone laughed. Even the waiter smiled politely, awkwardly. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The memory he mentioned wasn't even accurate. I'd had trouble because the terminal froze. Not because I didn't know how to use it, but none of that mattered. The story had been simplified, warped, turned into a punchline. And I was the joke. I looked at Ethan, my son, the boy who used to bring me dandelions and say I was the smartest person he knew. He wasn't being cruel on purpose. That's what I kept telling myself. But in that moment, he didn't see me as his mother. He saw me as a prop in a funny story, the harmless, forgetful old lady who can't quite keep up. I excused myself to the restroom. The hallway was cool and quiet. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My hands were shaking. I tried to steady them with deep breaths, but the humiliation had already settled into my skin. Not because of the joke, but because of how normal it had felt to everyone else. How easy it was for him to laugh at me in front of strangers. In the stall, I sat down, buried my face in my hands, and felt the kind of sadness that doesn't come from pain, but from recognition. Recognition that you're no longer someone people protect, that somewhere along the line, you went from cherished to tolerated. I didn't cry. I was past that. I just felt hollow. When I returned to the table, no one noticed I'd been gone for 15 minutes. They were halfway through their meals. I picked at my quiche, said little, and left early. No one offered to walk me to my car. In the weeks that followed, I stopped initiating plans. I didn't mention that brunch to anyone, not because I was embarrassed, but because I didn't know how to explain that the worst part wasn't the joke. It was realizing I wasn't worth more than a laugh. The decision didn't come with fireworks. There was no shouting, no slamming of doors, no final confrontation. It came quietly, like everything else in our unraveling. A quiet moment, a quiet suggestion, a quiet goodbye. It started with Ethan stopping by just to check in. I hadn't seen him in a few weeks. I opened the door in my housecoat, tea in hand, hopeful. But he didn't smile. He stepped inside, looking around as if taking inventory. I noticed he didn't sit, just paced, his phone clutched tightly in one hand. "Have you thought more about what we discussed?" he asked. I blinked. "About what?" "The place I showed you, the senior residence near Greenbridge." "Ah, that again." "I'm not ready for that, Ethan," I said calmly. "I'm doing fine here." He let out a breath, slow and frustrated. "Mom, we've been through this. The neighborhood's changing, the stairs are dangerous. You keep forgetting things." I looked at him, and for a moment, I wasn't standing in my living room. I was back at that brunch, in that moment where my name became a joke. That same heat crept into my cheeks. I forgot to water the plants last week, Ethan. That's not a crisis. That's life. You need help. I need my home, I replied, a little firmer this time. He paused, looked away. Then in a tone so calm it almost sounded rehearsed, he said, "They have an opening at Rose Pines. I already scheduled the intake appointment for next week. Just a tour." "A tour?" I repeated. "They'll evaluate you, make sure it's a good fit. It's got great reviews. Emily's mom's aunt stayed there." I set my tea down, my hand trembling now, not from age, but from restraint. "And you thought I should go," I said quietly. "On my birthday." He hesitated. "It's not on your birthday. It's near it. I figured it might be easier to transition while you're feeling good." He smiled as if that was some sort of comfort. I stared at the man in front of me, my only child, the boy I once rocked to sleep during thunderstorms, and I realized, truly and fully, that he was no longer seeing me. Not really. Not the woman who raised him. Not the woman who built a life from scraps after his father died. He saw an obligation, a risk, a liability. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I nodded, smiled faintly, and said, "Okay." And just like that, it was settled. I spent the next few days packing what he called essentials. Toiletries, sweaters, family photos in small frames. He said the rest could be handled later. We'll store the furniture, maybe sell the house eventually. He was already dividing up my life like it was clutter. The morning of my birthday, Ethan arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. Not with flowers, not with a gift, just a folded document and a pre-signed check. "To help with the transition," he said. I climbed into the car myself. No one helped me with the suitcase. The drive was silent. I looked out the window at familiar roads, every corner holding a memory. The corner store where Ethan bought gum as a kid, the park where we fed ducks on weekends, the old movie theater where we once saw Beauty and the Beast and he whispered, "That's us, Mom, your Belle." Now he barely glanced at me. Rose Pines was clean, polished, cheerful in a manufactured way. The lobby had pastel armchairs and a receptionist who greeted me like a hotel guest. A nurse appeared with a clipboard. Ethan spoke with her like I wasn't even standing there. Her memory's not what it used to be. She gets overwhelmed, sometimes forgets to eat. "I do not," I interjected. Ethan didn't respond. They walked me to a room with pale yellow walls and a twin bed. A window overlooked the parking lot. I set my suitcase down, sat on the edge of the mattress, and folded my hands in my lap. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "You'll be safe here," he said, almost as if he believed it. And then, just like that, he left. No hug, no happy birthday, not even a backward glance. I sat in that room for hours, watching the shadows shift on the floor. The door stayed closed. The hallway outside quieted. I listened to the soft ticking of the wall clock as it marked the passage of a birthday no one would celebrate. They thought they had placed me into stillness, that I would fade quietly into comfort and compliance. But they didn't realize. Stillness isn't surrender. The first night at Rose Pines felt like floating in someone else's dream. Bland, sterile, and somehow too quiet, despite the faint hum of air vents and distant wheelchairs squeaking down linoleum floors. I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed with its stiff floral blanket tucked too tight and listened to the subtle creaks of a building designed to erase people gently. No one knocked, no one called, no one remembered. The only thing that acknowledged it was my birthday was the generic whiteboard on the wall with the day's date scribbled in green marker. April 14th, lunch, meatloaf. That was it. That was my celebration. The hallway outside my room was dim, the kind of dim that dulls your thoughts. My roommate, Barbara, lay asleep with the TV on mute, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that told me she'd done this 1,000 times. Waited for no one. She didn't speak much when we first met, just nodded once and turned back toward the window. I wondered if she used to be a mother too. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling. There was a crack above me, thin and jagged, and I found myself tracing it with my eyes over and over until my lids grew heavy. It looked like the silhouette of a bird in flight, half finished, reaching for something it couldn't find. The next morning came without ceremony. Breakfast was served at precisely 7:30 a.m. Oatmeal, lukewarm coffee, a slice of pale banana. I sat at a long table with 5 other residents. No one spoke. The television in the corner played an old soap opera with the volume down too low to follow. I watched one of the aides, a young girl with a tired ponytail, walk past me 3 times without making eye contact. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I had become scenery. I started moving slower, talking less. I forgot what day it was more than once. Not because I was losing my mind, but because the days had lost their meaning. They all looked the same, sounded the same, tasted the same. I had gone from being a woman with a home and a history to someone with a patient chart and a medical wristband. I stopped unpacking after the first day. My suitcase remained in the closet, unopened. What was the point? Everything that mattered had already been packed away before I ever got here. Sometimes I'd sit by the window in the common room and watch the parking lot. There was a tree just outside, a young one, its branches thin and swaying in the wind. I imagined Ethan pulling up in his car, stepping out, opening the trunk with that distracted look on his face. I'd picture him holding flowers, maybe a card, maybe saying, "I'm sorry, Mom, I made a mistake." But the only thing that ever pulled into that lot was a delivery truck or someone else's relative coming to visit someone else's mother. On the 3rd night, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from the activities director, an invitation to a bingo night in the rec room. I stared at the cheery font and clip art of balloons. "Stolen. Prizes include $5 gift cards," it said. I tore it in half and threw it in the trash. Later that evening, Barbara spoke for the first time. She was sitting up, facing the dark, speaking like someone narrating their own memory. "My daughter stopped coming after 6 months," she said. "That's how long it takes. You'll see." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. We were both standing in the same quiet. It was in those moments, the silence, the stillness, the invisible ache, that I realized I had reached the bottom. Not because I was angry, not because I had lost something, but because I had nothing left to explain. No more excuses to make, no more lies to tell myself about love or loyalty. This wasn't a detour in my life. This was my life now. And it wasn't the physical room that made it unbearable. It was the emptiness of meaning, the feeling of being someone whose name no longer carried weight in anyone's world, who could disappear and leave no trace but a change of bed sheets. That was my rock bottom. And that's exactly where the fire started to stir. It was one of those slow-moving afternoons where the light filtered through the blinds in heavy stripes, cutting the room into pieces. Barbara was dozing again, the muted hum of her breathing syncing with the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. I sat at the small desk in the corner of our shared room, flipping through the same worn paperback I'd been pretending to read for days. But I couldn't concentrate. I hadn't been able to since I arrived. My mind wasn't in the book, it was in the hallway, in the parking lot, in every place I wanted to be but wasn't. I was restless but numb, like my soul was walking while my body sat still. A knock came at the door, soft, perfunctory. One of the aides stepped in, holding a small padded envelope. "This came for you," she said, without making eye contact, then turned and left before I could ask anything. I stared at the envelope for a moment. It had no return address, just my name scribbled in rushed handwriting that looked oddly familiar. I opened it slowly. Inside was a birthday card, cream-colored and old-fashioned, with delicate cursive across the front that read, "To my old friend with love." My heart skipped. I opened the card and immediately recognized the name at the bottom. Martha Delaney, my neighbor from 3 doors down. We had shared gardens, coffee mornings, and years of friendship before she'd moved to Florida last fall. We had lost touch, mostly because I stopped reaching out, embarrassed to admit that Ethan had put me here. Inside the card was a handwritten note. "Dee, I know you hate surprises, but I couldn't resist. Happy birthday, my darling friend. I hope you laugh when you open this. Lord knows we could both use a little luck. Miss you. Love you. Martha." Tucked into the crease of the card was a scratch-off lottery ticket. One of those cheap ones from a gas station. Bright colors, cartoon coins, a joke more than a gift. It wasn't the kind of thing Martha would normally give. That's what made me smile. She must have picked it up last minute and figured, Why not? It was such a small gesture, but in that moment it felt like gold. I stared at it for a long time before I reached into the drawer and pulled out an old quarter I'd brought from home, a memento from a vacation Ethan and I once took to Yosemite when he was 12. I turned it over in my hand, remembering how I used to tell him stories about the mountains etched on the back. Then I scratched the ticket, slowly, carefully. Not because I thought I would win, but because it gave my fingers something to do, something small and absurdly hopeful. First number, 12. Second, 34. Then came 12 again, then 34. Then I stopped. I stared, blinked. No, that couldn't be right. I looked again, read the instructions 3 times, matched the numbers, matched the symbols. Winner, $18 million. I laughed. It came out of me suddenly, too loud for a room so quiet. Barbara stirred. The walls, the ceiling, even the air seemed to pause for a beat. I clamped my hand over my mouth, afraid the sound would break whatever spell I'd just stumbled into. But it was real. I stood, paced, sat back down, checked it again. $18 million. Not 1, not 5, 18. I hadn't won a raffle in my life. I'd never gambled, never bought scratch-offs, never even played bingo back when it was shoved into every community center. But here I was. In a nursing home I didn't choose. On a birthday everyone had ignored, holding more money than I could imagine. And suddenly, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks, months, maybe even years shifted. It didn't disappear, but it moved. Like a door that had been nailed shut, creaked open just enough to let air in. I didn't cheer. I didn't jump up and down. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't call anyone. Not my money, not my peace, not even an explanation. I folded the card carefully, tucked it back into the envelope, and slid it into the drawer with the quarter. For the first time since arriving at Rose Pines, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. Something shifted after that day. Not outside. No one at Rose Pines noticed a thing, but inside me it was seismic. I didn't walk faster or smile brighter. I didn't rush into anyone's office waving the ticket like a golden key. I didn't tell a soul, but I started looking at the world differently, at myself differently. The next morning, I rose before the breakfast bell. For weeks, I dragged myself out of bed, moving like an old machine winding down. But this time, I sat up slowly and felt a strange calm in my chest. Not joy, not excitement, just asterisk, asterisk clarity, asterisk, asterisk. The kind that only comes when you realize you're no longer stuck. I washed my face, brushed my hair with more care than I had in days. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a forgotten old woman. I saw someone who had been underestimated, who'd been bruised, yes, but not broken. I started keeping a journal. Nothing elaborate, just a simple notebook I bought from the Rose Pines gift shop. I wrote in it every day, memories of better times, ideas for what I could do with the money. Thoughts I hadn't let myself entertain in years. Not plans yet, just sparks. I wrote about the time Ethan and I danced in the living room to an old Elvis record, both of us laughing so hard we nearly fell over. I wrote about my late husband and how he used to say, "Dee, you are the anchor in the sail." I didn't fully understand it then. I think I do now. Each day I added more to that notebook. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. I wasn't waiting to be rescued anymore. I wasn't counting on Ethan to show up. I wasn't counting on anyone to see me. Because I saw myself again. One afternoon, I went out to the community garden, a place I had avoided until then. I knelt near the edge, where the rosemary bush struggled under the weight of neglect, and began to prune it, carefully, intentionally. A few residents walked by, nodding. One said, "Didn't know anyone still cared about the garden." I just smiled. The truth is, I didn't do it for them, I did it for me. To feel the soil under my nails, to feel capable again, alive again. I stopped going to bingo night, but I started attending the poetry readings. I even read one of my own. It was short, just 6 lines, but it made one of the aides cry. She hugged me afterward and whispered, "That was beautiful, Miss Grant." No one had called me by my full name in months, and in that moment I realized something even deeper than the money or the power it gave me. Asterisk, asterisk. I hadn't disappeared. Asterisk, asterisk. I'd just been hiding in plain sight. At night, I began researching, quietly, carefully. I asked the nurse if I could use the common room computer. I looked up real estate listings in quiet coastal towns. I researched attorneys. I bookmarked financial planners. I wasn't rushing. I was preparing. Every click, every note, every quiet email I sent was a thread in the web I was weaving. Not of revenge, but of asterisk, asterisk, return, asterisk, asterisk. Return to the woman I had always been before life tried to shrink me. I even looked up the Women's Literacy Fund, a nonprofit I'd once donated to in passing. Their mission stuck with me now in a way it hadn't before, to remind women of all ages that their voices matter. I bookmarked their donation page. I'd never been a vengeful person. I didn't need Ethan to suffer, but I needed him to know he couldn't define me, that his silence, his betrayal, his abandonment, that was his asterisk legacy to carry, not mine. What stirred in me wasn't rage. It was asterisk, asterisk, resolve, asterisk, asterisk. Resolve to reclaim what I'd lost. Resolve to become more than a file folder in a facility's drawer. Resolve to walk away not just from Rose Pines, but from the version of myself that accepted erasure. So I planned, quietly, daily, with no ceremony, no need for applause. The fire in me wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It was steady, and it was growing. I didn't tell a soul, not Barbara, not the nurses, not even the sweet volunteer named Lily who sometimes brought in her therapy dog and sat with me while I pruned the garden. The secret wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the power that silence gave me. For the first time in years, I had something no one else could touch, control, or dismiss, and I intended to use it. The first thing I did was request a paper copy of my identification documents. My birth certificate, social security card, bank statements, all mailed to a secure P.O. box I had quietly opened weeks earlier through a third-party courier service. I used the facility's fax machine under the pretense of transferring insurance paperwork, and no one questioned it. Elderly people filing endless forms wasn't exactly suspicious. Then came the bank account. I contacted a private financial firm in a neighboring state, one that specialized in asset protection for high net worth individuals. I found them online and called from a prepaid cell phone I ordered anonymously. The woman on the other end, Samantha, she said her name was, spoke to me like I was anyone else. Not an old woman, not someone who needed assistance, just a client. That alone felt revolutionary. We arranged everything with coded emails, signed documents, and multiple verification steps. I transferred the winnings discreetly, with the help of her legal team. No press, no headlines, no family notifications. By the time the lottery office processed my identity and issued the funds, I had already erected legal walls so high not even Ethan could climb them. Then came the next step, the will. I found an estate attorney who agreed to do remote consultations. I explained everything in detail, my estrangement from my only child, the circumstances of my placement in the facility, the betrayal not of a stranger but of someone I raised. He listened carefully, didn't interrupt, and when I finished, he said something that stayed with me. You don't owe your legacy to someone who treated you like a burden. We rewrote everything. My new will left nothing to Ethan. Not a dollar, not a photo, not a single word. Instead, I named 3 beneficiaries. The Women's Literacy Fund, a small animal rescue in Vermont that I once donated to after my dog passed, and a local scholarship foundation for first-generation college students. Kids like Ethan once was, but with kinder hearts. I signed the documents and had them notarized through the same courier service. No one in Rose Pines knew a thing. At dinner, I still sat at my usual table. I still said thank you when the aides refilled my water. I still played along when the staff asked if I was settling in. I smiled, nodded, folded my napkin neatly before standing up, all while a completely different version of my life was being built quietly behind the scenes. I started packing slowly. Not everything, just the things I would actually take with me. The notebook, the card from Martha, the photo of me and Ethan at Yosemite. I packed them not because I was clinging to the past, but because I wanted proof. Proof of the woman I used to be, the mother I had once been. I didn't need to erase the past. I just needed to write the ending myself. On the outside, I was still the compliant resident, but on the inside, I had already left. The final piece of my plan came on a Thursday morning. I arranged for my lawyer's office to send a formal discharge notice to Rose Pines, citing a change in financial capacity and private long-term care arrangements. The facility director was confused, tried calling my emergency contact, Ethan, but of course my number had already been changed. I was already gone. Not physically yet, but in every way that mattered, I was no longer theirs to monitor. That afternoon, I sat in the garden one last time. I ran my fingers along the lavender stems, breathed in the cool spring air, and watched the sky stretch wide above me, open and endless. No one suspected a thing, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Because true power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from moving in silence, with the knowledge that when you finally stand, you'll never have to shrink again. The most satisfying thing about silence is how unnerving it becomes. Not when you're ignored, but when you choose not to respond. That's when people start to panic. That's when they realize they're not in control anymore. It started with a phone call. Ethan. I saw his name flash on the prepaid phone I kept tucked inside my knitting bag. It had been nearly 3 weeks since I changed my number, updated my records, and removed him as my emergency contact. The call didn't come on my birthday, not on Mother's Day, just randomly, like he'd finally realized something wasn't right. I didn't answer. A minute later, a second call, then a text. "Mom, you okay? I called Rose Pines. They said you're not there. Where are you?" I set the phone down on the windowsill. The garden outside was blooming now. The rosemary bush I'd tended had sprouted tiny lavender flowers. I watched a bumblebee move between blossoms as Ethan's messages kept coming in. "Did something happen? Can we talk? Please just let me know you're okay." For months I had begged, in my head, in my heart, for Ethan to notice me, to call me back, to ask if I was okay. Now I had all of that, and it meant absolutely nothing. The next day, I received an email forwarded from my attorney's office. Ethan had contacted the bank, then the lottery office, then the facility, then the lawyer. He had questions, urgent ones. He was trying to find me, but he wasn't worried about me. He was worried about access, about inheritance, about how fast the ground was shifting under his feet. He wasn't used to not being in charge. He wasn't used to being shut out. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. Ethan had built his sense of power on my willingness to forgive, on the belief that no matter how badly he treated me, I would always answer the phone, always explain myself, always come back. But I wasn't coming back this time. Not to him. Not to the version of me he expected to stand by quietly while he dictated my life. I was already living somewhere else now. A small condo by the coast, with wide windows and white curtains that fluttered in the sea breeze. The day I arrived, I opened every window and let the wind fill the space like a baptism. I'd used a fake name on the moving paperwork, just initials. No public listings, no announcements, just peace. And oh, what peace it was. I made my own tea again, played records in the morning, sat on the balcony and watched the tide roll in. I walked into town and joined a book club. No one knew my history. No one whispered behind my back. I was just Delilah again, not Ethan's mom, not a resident of room 214, just a woman with time and silence and choices. Ethan's calls kept coming. I changed the ringtone to nothing, not even a vibration. He sent emails through the lawyer. "Just want to understand what happened. Let's talk. We can figure this out." But there was nothing left to figure out. He had made his decisions when he left me at Rose Pines without a word, when he laughed at my expense, when he turned love into obligation and presence into pity. Now the balance was different. Now I held the silence, and it spoke volumes. I donated the first large sum to the Women's Literacy Fund anonymously. My attorney delivered it in person with one condition: no press release, no interviews. I didn't want praise. I wanted purpose. And purpose feels different than praise. Purpose stays with you when the house is quiet and the waves roll in. Purpose tells you that your story matters, even if it was almost erased. In town, people began to know me simply as Miss Grant, the woman who always had a book in her bag and a knowing smile, the one who asked questions and really listened. I started volunteering at the library on weekends, helping young girls with their reading. Watching them find strength in their voices reminded me of the voice I had finally reclaimed. I didn't need to strike back. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to stand. And standing silently in your own power is louder than anything the world can throw at you. Because once the power begins to shift, you stop waiting for someone to save you. You realize you already did. It came not with fire, but with stillness. By the time Ethan found me, I had been gone for almost 3 months. I don't know how he did it. Maybe through a bank trail he wasn't supposed to access. Or maybe someone at Rose Pines let something slip. It didn't matter. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was choosing not to be seen by him. The knock on my condo door came on a warm Tuesday afternoon. I was folding laundry, humming to myself, the scent of lemon soap still fresh in the air. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, rumpled, tired, a bouquet of gas station flowers in one hand, I didn't flinch, not like I thought I might. He looked startled to see me calm. "Mom," he said, "you look different." I stepped aside wordlessly and let him in. I had no intention of letting him linger, but I didn't want drama on my front step. This was my space now, my peace, and I would protect it with quiet strength. He walked into the living room, his eyes scanning everything like it didn't make sense. The framed seascape paintings, the tidy bookshelves, the pot of rosemary on the windowsill. He set the flowers awkwardly on the table. "You didn't answer any of my calls," he said. "No," I replied simply, folding a hand towel and setting it on the stack. "I was worried." "Were you?" He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw confusion swim behind his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse. Just confusion because he could feel the difference now. The balance between us had shifted, and he didn't know how to stand on uneven ground. "I didn't mean for things to get like that," he said. "You have to know I was just trying to help. Rose Pines. It wasn't supposed to feel like punishment." I sat down across from him and crossed my hands in my lap. My voice, when I spoke, was even. "You didn't leave me at a care facility because you were worried about my safety, Ethan. You did it because I no longer fit into the life you were building. I became inconvenient." "That's not fair," he said, shaking his head. "You were struggling. You said yourself you were tired, that you were falling behind." "I was tired," I agreed. "Tired of begging for scraps of your attention. Tired of explaining myself. Tired of pretending your absence was love." He fell silent. I let it linger. "I didn't disappear," I continued. "You stopped seeing me. There's a difference." He looked down at his hands. "I just thought you needed help." "You're right. I did need help, but not the kind you gave. I needed to be asked how I was, to be listened to be invited in, not set aside." I leaned forward slightly. And even if I did need help, I should have been part of the decision, not dropped off like forgotten luggage. On my birthday, his face flushed. I didn't know what else to do. Emily said, "I'm not interested in what Emily said." That silenced him. I stood and walked over to the windowsill, brushing my fingers over the rosemary plant. "Ethan, this isn't about money. It never was. This is about value, mine. The kind you stopped recognizing long before Rose Pines." "I didn't come for money," he said quickly. "I swear." I turned to face him. "Good, because you're not getting any." He flinched, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I rewrote the will. Everything is spoken for. Every cent. His mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't do it out of spite," I said. "I did it because I've finally learned that legacy isn't about who gets what when you die. It's about who sees you while you're alive." He looked at me for a long time then, as if trying to find a version of me he could still manipulate, still soothe with apologies and promises. But she wasn't there anymore. She had packed up her silence and moved out with her dignity. "I'm not angry, Ethan," I said, softer now. "I'm just done." And that was it. No screaming, no drama, just the truth, sitting clean and sharp between us. He left soon after. The flowers stayed on the table unopened. I didn't throw them out, I just let them wilt, like things do when they no longer serve a purpose, and for the first time in a very long time. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel abandoned. I felt whole. Ethan thought that was the end, that the awkward apology and my firm boundary would be the worst of it. But he hadn't yet realized what true justice looks like. Not revenge, not drama, not a courtroom or a confrontation. Real justice is quiet. It's clean. It slips in through the cracks and rearranges the story before anyone realizes the ending has changed. A week after he left my condo, my attorney filed the final version of my will with the appropriate offices. It was official now. Signed, sealed, irrevocable. The estate, every penny of the $18 million, had been allocated down to the last dollar. I didn't send Ethan a notice. I let him find out the same way I had found out he placed me in a nursing home, secondhand. It happened just after the fiscal quarter changed. My financial advisor, Samantha, had begun dispersing early donations from my estate into 3 separate trusts, one for the Women's Literacy Fund, one for the Scholarship Foundation, and one for the Animal Rescue Organization. These were not symbolic gifts, they were transformative. The Literacy Fund would build 3 new learning centers in underserved neighborhoods. The scholarship would cover full tuition for 20 students a year. The rescue would expand its shelter and medical treatment facilities, all with my name, Delilah Grant, on the founding donor plaques. I didn't ask for the publicity, but it came anyway. An article appeared in a regional magazine. Nothing flashy, just a feature titled "The Woman Who Gave It All Away." It included a brief story about an anonymous donor, an unexpected windfall, and her decision to invest in strangers instead of blood. Ethan saw it. I know this because he emailed Samantha directly. "This is a mistake. That's my mother. She doesn't have that kind of money. Please contact me urgently." She didn't reply to him. She forwarded the message to me. I didn't reply either. Instead, I mailed him a single certified letter. Return receipt requested. The envelope was plain, the handwriting mine. Inside was a copy of the will, notarized and stamped. The cover letter read, "Ethan, as you can see, my affairs have been settled. There will be no inheritance, no appeals, no loopholes. Everything has been done legally and with great care. I wanted you to see it in black and white, not because I want to hurt you, but because I want you to stop waiting for something that will never come. Take care of yourself. Delilah Grant." I didn't sign it, Mom. That role had been slowly taken from me piece by piece until it no longer belonged to either of us. A week later, I received a delivery. A box of my old belongings. Photos, some books, a scarf I thought I'd lost. No note, no explanation, just the things he must have found while cleaning out the house he now lived in. I opened the box and gently removed each item, setting them on my shelves like artifacts from a former life. Then I reached the bottom, and there it was. The card I gave him on his 10th birthday, the one where I wrote, "You are my greatest joy." It was folded carefully, kept all these years, now returned without a word. I sat with it in my lap for a long time. There was no triumph in this moment, no glee, just peace. A sense that the final piece had clicked into place. Not because I'd punished him, but because I had chosen me. For so long, I'd believed that love meant enduring, that motherhood meant forgiving without question, staying no matter how invisible you became. But love without respect isn't love, it's duty. And duty without dignity is just servitude. I had escaped that, and I had rewritten the ending. That night, I walked along the beach just before sunset. The tide was low, the breeze cool against my face. I stood barefoot at the edge of the surf, watching the waves roll in and then retreat again. each one smoothing out the scars in the sand. A young couple passed by with a toddler. The child was laughing, chasing a crab along the shoreline. The parents smiled, holding hands, unaware of the woman watching from the edge of her new life. And I smiled too. Not because I'd won, but because I had let go. And in that release, I had found justice. It had been nearly 6 months since the last message, long enough for the noise to quiet, for the tension to settle into the earth like old roots. I no longer checked my phone with hesitation. I no longer rehearsed imagined conversations or braced for apologies that didn't come. The past, for once, felt like it was exactly where it belonged, behind me. Then one afternoon, while watering my rosemary plant, I heard the knock. Not the sharp, impatient kind I remembered from Ethan's last visit. This one was soft, hesitant. I froze for a moment, my hand hovering above the ceramic pot. The light from the window caught the glass just right, and for a second, I saw my reflection looking back, composed, strong, and most importantly, not afraid. I opened the door. There he stood, hands in his pockets, eyes duller than I remembered. His hair was longer. He looked tired, worn in a way that wasn't just physical, and in his right hand a small, slightly crumpled paper bag, one from the bakery 2 blocks over. I recognized the logo. "Hi," he said. I didn't reply immediately, just studied him, waiting to see if he'd start with a reason or an excuse. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said quickly. I was in the area. I remembered you liked the lemon scones from that bakery." He held the bag out like a peace offering, not expecting me to take it, but still hoping. I stepped aside. He entered cautiously, as if the walls themselves might push him out. I gestured to the couch. He sat. I didn't. Instead, I made tea, the same way I always had. 2 cups, no sugar in his, lemon wedge in mine. I placed the cups down between us, then sat across from him. For a while, neither of us spoke. He broke first. "I read the article," he said, "the one about the donations." I nodded. "I didn't realize everything you did, or how much you gave away." I looked him in the eyes. "You didn't realize a lot of things." He lowered his gaze. "Yeah, I know." I waited. Let the weight of the moment stretch across the table. "I'm not here to change your mind," he said. I needed to say that I'm sorry. For all of it. For the way I treated you. For how I talked about you to other people. For how I left you that day." He swallowed hard, eyes glassy. "I don't know why I thought I could get away with it. That you'd always just take it. I was so used to you being the one who stayed no matter what." "I was," I said quietly. "Until I wasn't." He nodded, shame etched into the lines around his mouth. "I see that now. And I don't blame you. Not for the will, not for disappearing. I guess I hoped we could talk. One last time. Not to fix anything. Just to see each other, maybe." I sipped my tea. "You're seeing me now." A silence passed. Not tense, just honest. "I don't expect you to let me in again," he said. "But if you ever want to, if you ever want to call or have lunch or just tell me about your garden, I'd like that." He stood then, leaving the scone bag on the table. "I'll let you be," he said. "I just needed you to know I was listening. Finally." At the door, he hesitated. "You were right. You don't owe me anything." I didn't speak until he'd stepped outside. "You're right, too," I said, just loud enough for him to hear. "I don't. But I don't carry hate either, just peace. You're welcome to find yours, too." He turned, nodded once, and walked away. The bag sat unopened for hours. Eventually, I pulled out the scone, still slightly warm. I broke off a corner and tasted it. Lemon soft, just sweet enough. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was acknowledgement, and sometimes that's enough. Not because it changes what happened, but because it proves that even after everything, we can still choose grace. Even if the door stays closed, even if the past never fits neatly back into place, we can still offer peace and keep it for ourselves. Mornings are different now. I wake before the sun when the world is still stretching and sighing. I make tea slowly, not because I have to, but because I want to. I open the curtains and let the light in, soft and golden, the kind that touches everything gently, like it's asking permission. I sit on the balcony, wrapped in a knitted shawl, and listen. The sea murmurs in the distance, a constant rhythm that no longer feels lonely. The birds arrive like clockwork, perching on the railing, waiting for me to scatter crumbs from my toast. I oblige them, smiling at how even the smallest creatures remember kindness. It's a quiet life, but it is mine. Sometimes I think about the woman I used to be, the one who sat on the edge of a twin bed at Rose Pines, her birthday unspoken, her future uncertain. I don't feel sorry for her. I feel grateful to her because she didn't vanish. She waited, she watched, and when the moment came, she chose herself. I keep a small wooden box on my bookshelf. Inside is the lottery ticket, creased, faded, but still legible. Most people would have framed it, maybe even flaunted it, but not me. It's not the money I care about, it's what it represented. The turning point, the moment when everything changed. Not because of the prize, but because of the possibility. That ticket didn't save me. It reminded me that I could save myself. Near it, I keep the card Martha sent. The one with the silly handwriting and the unexpected love. That day, I didn't just win a lottery. I rediscovered connection. Proof that even when the world forgets you, there are people somewhere still rooting for you in quiet ways. In the kitchen, there's a photo strip pinned to the fridge. 4 pictures, black and white, from a photo booth downtown. Me and 2 girls from the book club. We had gone out for ice cream after our weekly discussion. 3 women who once thought their best years were behind them. In the last frame, we're all laughing so hard our eyes are shut. I look at that photo often, not because I need reminding of what joy looks like, but because I need reminding that it returns. I don't think about Ethan every day, and when I do, it's not with anger. It's with distance, the kind that time and healing carve with intention. I don't check my messages for his name. I don't wait for an apology, but I also don't regret offering peace. Not for him, for me. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. It means release. And I have released it all. I never went back to Rose Pines, never drove by, never looked over my shoulder. But one day I wrote a check, anonymously, to fund a program that brings art and writing classes to senior living facilities. I didn't want my name on it. I just wanted someone sitting in a room like mine, at a window like mine, to feel a little less forgotten. There's something beautiful about being able to give without being seen. It's its own kind of freedom. Last week, one of the scholarship recipients sent me a handwritten letter. She didn't know who I was, just that someone believed in me enough to give me a chance. I folded the letter and placed it next to the card from Martha. 2 reminders. One of how it started, one of why it mattered. As for what's next, I don't know. And that's the best part. I might start painting, or learn how to sail, or maybe I'll just keep baking lemon scones for the neighbors and reading poetry on the beach. I don't need a big ending. I've had enough of those. What I crave now is continuance, the kind that doesn't demand a narrative, just presence. There's something sacred about being allowed to exist fully again, not as a mother, not as a resident, not as a patient, but as Delilah Grant, woman, survivor, creator of her own ending. And when I sit at that window, watching the tide breathe in and out like an old friend, I whisper one simple truth to myself. You didn't just get your life back, you reclaimed it. And that, more than any fortune or apology, is the legacy I leave behind.